Hello, and welcome to a brand new day of free-to-play here on Magic the Gathering Arena. Get the dish on the latest with me, Lord Rumfish, and the latest is the banned and restricted announcement. Today is May 29th, 2023, and they have chosen to ban 3 cards. That's more in line with what I expect of Wizards. They usually try to ban the fewest cards possible. And they have gone with Fable of the Mirrorbreaker, Invoke Despair, and Reckoner Bankbuster. So I think most people expected that Fable and Reckoner were going to get banned. They were extremely ubiquitous, meaning they show up everywhere. Invoke Despair is the interesting angle here on this one. So let's get right into the meat of why these cards in particular. So they say, we've been watching the rise and dominance of the core 3-color shell based in black-red over the past several set releases and premier level tournaments. We believe these changes will help reduce the win rate of the dominant strategy in the format and create an exciting shake-up and entry point to the format preceding the summer and release of Wilds of Eldraine. So that's something that Wizards has over the community. They know the next few expansions of cards. So they may know more about what they want out of Wilds of Eldraine, what it's going to add to the format. It was not planned to be in a 3-year rotation, so it might do some things that are unexpected. But their choice of cards here could matter for what they know about upcoming sets. Fable of the Mirrorbreaker has been the backbone of strategies based in black-red, one of the strongest cards in the format for the entirety of its tenure in Standard. Yeah, hard to argue with that. Its ability to generate resources, card flow, and be a must-kill threat is unmatched at its level of efficiency. Counterplay available to it is low and frequently costs much more than 3 mana. Off the top of my head, I can think of 3 cards in Standard that are good counterplays to it. One is Lauren of the Third Path. Right, she could blow up the Fable, kill the token when it attacks, and all they'd be left with is a treasure. Another one is a 4-mana spell. It's the Riveteers one, the Jund one. I forget the name of it. Deals 7 damage to a creature. Excess damage can blow up an artifact or enchantment, so you could use that to hit the token and blow up the Fable. Or there's Invoke Despair, and Invoke Despair is 5 mana. It's especially difficult to beat on the draw, for sure. By removing Fable, we hope to reduce the power of black-red decks, but also make deck-building choices for these strategies more meaningful as to whether they want to cast a threat, card selection, or the ability to enable reanimation. For these reasons, as well as the high play rate of the card across many decks, Fable is banned. I don't think this is going to surprise anybody. Reckoner Bankbuster has been the go-to card advantage engine for many decks in Standard since its release. As a colorless card, it has been effortless to slot into a wide variety of colors and strategies. Yeah. Its general ubiquity and strength have pushed out other card advantage options too much as a colorless card. It has also put stress on creature sizing, as creatures that can crew Reckoner Bankbuster have been more favored than others. To promote more diversity and give power back to other types of cards in different colors, Reckoner Bankbuster is banned. So again, I don't think this is going to surprise anyone. The only unfortunate part about banning Reckoner Bankbuster is it helps out the weaker decks as well as the stronger decks. But a card that shows up this much across every deck list in Standard probably is warping the format in some way. So, yeah, mixed feelings, but I guess it needs to go. Invoke Despair has been the premier curve topper in most black-red decks and black-based strategies for most of its lifetime. Yeah, the number of decks that completely warp themselves to manage to cast a card that has 4 black pips, even in a 3, 4, 5 color deck, it's kind of weird. Really and truly, it's kind of weird. Not only is it powerful for managing the battlefield and generating card advantage, it's been Excellent for shoring up some of Black's weaknesses. Traditionally playing a wide variety of permanent types is strong against decks with a lot of 1-for-1 removal. Invoke Despair makes it especially difficult to find ample counterplay to Black strategies, as it is an effective card to cast on empty boards and preys upon the enchantments and planeswalkers that are historically effective against these types of removal-heavy strategies. Due to its power level and negative impact on card diversity, Invoke Despair is banned. This one, people have argued a lot back and forth. And there were other cards in contention for banning in this spot. I mean, some people wanted to see like 10 cards banned, and I don't think I would have minded, especially if that had happened. But I've seen a lot of ban announcements in my life, and Wizards is always cautious when it comes to banning. They try to ban the fewest cards possible. So 3 is actually a pretty big number for them. It's interesting they've chosen Invoke Despair over the other options. So they've taken something away from red, they've taken something away from black, and they've taken out a colorless card. Now, some of the other cards in the format will get a little bit less powerful with this change. So for instance, Sheoldred, right? All 3 of the cards that just got banned draw cards. It's an interesting thing they have in common. So you're going to gain less life off your Sheoldred with these cards out of the format. Reckoner Bankbuster means you don't have as many options to crew up to where it's sort of like you have a haste creature almost, right? Like, it's not exactly like playing a 4/4 on 2, but it's not completely unlike it either. Now that that's gone, cards like Sheoldred, the curve isn't as amazing, right? The things you play around Sheoldred are not as over the top. You know, Sheoldred into Invoke Despair is really powerful, but like Sheoldred with Fable could gain you life on Chapter 2, or Sheoldred with Reckoner Bankbuster, she could crew it up, or you could draw cards off of it and gain life. All that's taken away now. I think I kind of understand why they left Sheoldred in the format. Okay, here we are back on Arena. Looking at some cards that did not get banned. Thalia, Guardian of Thraben. She's a reprint. She's had a good long tenure and across her various cards. And she's going to be with us, it would appear, for a while yet in Standard. So, First Strike, of course, makes her annoying, but far more than that is the non-creature spells cost 1 more to cast. I feel like Thalia being in the format actually warps it quite a bit. There are a lot of decks that I feel would be relatively viable that Thalia on 2 on the play just makes them not worth trying to play, or whatever your deck was trying to do, you must include 1 mana removal spells. Now, it doesn't matter what strategy it was, if you're trying to cast non-creature spells, you have to have 1 mana removal spells in your deck because of Thalia. And that's kind of weird. It's kind of a nasty deck building constraint. That you always know it's something you could come up against, especially in Best of 1. Best of 1 aggro decks tend to do relatively well, better than Best of 3. And Thalia can be a big part of that. She plays pretty well with Rafine. She does not play so well with Wedding Announcement, but yeah, Thalia feels like she really changes what kind of decks are viable in the format, so I'm not happy to see her around still. I feel like maybe she should have gone for the deck building options that would have opened up. So as I mentioned, Wedding Announcement's not getting banned. This one will be with us a while longer. It's not as powerful as Fable, but it has a lot of the same things that Fable had going for it. Now, with Invoke Despair gone, you might not feel as much pressure to run a card like this because this was like insurance against an Invoke Despair, right? You have a token creature to sacrifice, you have an enchantment to get rid of, so you don't lose so much life, they don't draw so many cards, you know. It's a pretty good value card overall and good against Invoke Despair. That consideration's not here anymore, but the card's still really good. So, remains to be seen if this one's going to take over Standard or not. As, again, does not play well with Thalia. Plays well into a different kind of strategy. Some people had mentioned the Wandering Emperor as a potential ban. Don't get me wrong, Wandering Emperor is annoying, but you can play around it. You know, if they've got 4 mana up and 2 white, then they've either got the Wandering Emperor or they're bluffing the Wandering Emperor. And it does warp the format a little bit in that vigilance matters much more than it otherwise would. And you have to take into consideration that anything you attack into could be a 2/2 or +1/+1 in first strike. But overall, I think this card can be played around, can be dealt with, and is not really the elephant in the room. So I think it's okay. Don't think anything in mono blue was up in the conversation about banning. That should tell you something. Alright, so here's Sheoldred again. Sheoldred's going to be with us for a while longer. Some of her support pieces have been taken away, but Sheoldred herself is still here. She is a heck of a clock. Kind of demands some removal be included into any deck you play, and that makes it harder on red and green. Red doesn't have as many easy answers to Sheoldred. They're not as mana efficient. Right, red can kill Sheoldred for 3. But 3 is not really what you want to be paying for a removal spell. Some red decks do run 5 damage answers, though, just because of Sheoldred. And green needs the fight spell that's not a fight spell. You know, your, what is it, bite down, and other things, where it deals damage equal to a creature's power, and you need a creature that has 5 power. There's kind of a big deal. And if you do a fight spell, then your creature dies with the death touch. And of course, if you don't have an answer, the way you get to an answer is you draw cards. Sheoldred's an incredibly frustrating card. But as I said, some of her support pieces have been taken away. Is there a chance that means people use her a little bit less? Time will tell. I hope so. Invoke Despair is about to go the way of the dodo. So definitely one of the most annoying cards in the format. At 4 black pips, there's only so ubiquitous it can be, but people have tried to cram it into multicolor decks. I've seen it. So this is leaving. So black is not going to have as easy of an answer to enchantments and planeswalkers. They've always had good creature answers. But this is also kind of a mini board sweeper. And, you know, it's card advantage and a win condition all wrapped up into one. And now that's leaving. And that's going to leave black with some quandaries as to how to move forward from here. I think it will open up space for some other pretty neat black cards. You know, Gix's Command, Sheoldred, Junji. You know, there's good stuff on this page that I'm looking at here. So maybe Invoke Despair leaving will make Sheoldred a little bit weaker. Maybe it'll make the deck as a whole a bit weaker. Maybe that'll add some breathing room for other strategies to come in. I'm not sad to see this one gone. I did have my fun playing it. You know, I had a black burn deck where I ran Corrupt and Invoke Despair and things that went straight to the opponent's face. And that was fun for a while, but I'm not sad to see it go. One of the parts of the conversation here was some people asking whether Meatook Massacre should be unbanned. Now, That would be interesting. It would totally wreck the format. I think Black-Red would not get any weaker for certain. If this card was unbanned, it would slot right into the Black-Red decks, Grixis decks, anything that's running black, really. If you haven't played against the Meatook Massacre or played with it, it's an incredibly powerful card. It's sort of like a mini Blood Artist effect attached to a board sweeper. Gains you life, loses the opponent life. So again, kind of like Invoke Despair, Meatook Massacre could be a win condition on its own, where the opponent just keeps losing life over the course of the game. And even though it was expensive, the Meatook Massacre could kill just about anything. If the game ran late enough, you know, they could get to 9 mana and kill your, you know, Titans of Industry and whatever else you're playing. It's an exceptionally powerful card, and it's probably the wrong choice to unban it. So you know, I did enjoy playing with this card. It was also annoying to play against. It made aggro decks just kind of impossible to play in the format. Any kind of small creature-based strategy. You had to have value, you had to go over the top. You know, you couldn't just run out a bunch of creatures and run into a Meatook Massacre. That was unacceptable. So, like, soldiers, legends, humans, a bunch of decks would just be completely invalidated if this card came back. So I'm not going to argue that it stays banned. Alright, Fable of the Mirror Breaker. So this one, I guess I ought to craft a couple of copies here. Because I'll get the card in whatever format it happens to be legal in, and I'll get the wild cards refunded. Anyway, so Fable of the Mirror Breaker, I think it's interesting that this is the only red card that was up for banning. And after this card leaves, how good is red after that? Maybe we'll see. Maybe some big red decks built around Koth and some other stuff will come up. Maybe we'll see some alternate, mid-rangey kind of red decks. Time will tell, but I guess I'm left wondering if red is a little lackluster once you get past Fable of the Mirror Breaker. I don't know. I'm not going to be sad to see this card go. I discovered this one kind of early on when no one was talking about it. I was running it in a control deck. I was playing in Alchemy at the time because that was really early in Alchemy, before I stopped playing Alchemy. And I tested it out there in a 3-color Mardu pile, and I was like, wow, this card's actually pretty good. You know, it makes a pair of 2/2s, lets you filter your hand. The 2/2s have added upside. I was like, what's not to like? And then it turned out that everyone liked it, and it went everywhere. And then you got sick of seeing it ad nauseum, you know. So, which means until sick, I believe. Until nauseous. Yeah, I'm not going to be sad to see this one go. There are plenty of other cards in the format that enable Reanimator strategies. So many cards. So many good options to do that. There are other cards to ramp your mana. There are other cards to give you value. And there are even other cards that can copy creatures. Those are a lot weaker than this one, but they do exist. So, yeah, I'm not going to be sad to see this one go, and I don't think too many other people will be either. But where does it leave red? That's the question. I don't think there's a single mono green card that's been suggested for banning, and that should tell you something. I don't think anyone's been talking about banning Ob Nixilis Captive Kingpin yet. The card is really new to the format. And, cards like Invoke Despair were keeping people from being able to accomplish the combo with All Will Be One very effectively. This is one I'd like to keep an eye on, though. I feel like Obnixilis could become very ubiquitous if there aren't ample answers to stop it. Could be an infinite damage combo. I'm interested to see where this one goes, but definitely not in the ban conversation yet. It's too soon. So Rafine is another card that's going to be with us for a while yet. Now Rafine does die to a cut down when she first hits the battlefield, but you don't have a big window to kill Rafine before she connives onto herself and grows out of range of a lot of removal spells. Rafine's an incredibly powerful card. Black-Red have had some tools taken away from them, and most Rafine decks weren't really running Reckoner Bankbuster. They're running creatures. They want to get down, they want to attack, they want to connive. So I don't think the Rafine decks have really lost much of anything in this ban announcement, and could stand to profit quite a bit. So we'll see where Rafine goes. Playing against this card is very annoying, but there are ways to play around this deck. Board sweepers that ignore indestructible creatures and creatures that are hard to target, like with Ward, could be very good against Rafine. I'm thinking of cards like Sunfall and By Invitation Only and Farewell. Which, if that's the case, maybe this ban announcement opens up some different archetypes where control becomes a little bit more of a foot in the door. We'll see. We'll see what happens. I think Rafine is poised to climb up and take the crown. Oh, the card whose name I was trying to remember earlier was Unleash the Inferno. This is one of the only cards in Standard that was a clean answer to Fable of the Mirrorbreaker. It doesn't matter now, but I was trying to remember this card's name. It's Unleash the Inferno. Some people had mentioned Atraxa Grand Unifier as a potential ban target, and I understand why. There are some kinds of decks that have trouble dealing with Atraxa, but it's strange. In my experience playing against Atraxa, she's not as good as she looks. That's probably going to sound crazy to a lot of people out there. But she doesn't affect the board very much. She's a good creature, right, if she lives. So kind of like Sheoldred, I suppose, where if you have a removal spell, all that effort that they put forth was a hand refill, but maybe you're ahead on the board, and maybe cards are not even what they need. Maybe what they needed was a board presence, and Titan of Industry would have been better. They could have put out 11 power and toughness and gained 4 life. Or they could have added a shield counter, or blown up one of your artifacts and enchantments. Atraxa's just a body. A very good body, but I think I understand the argument against banning her. And the other thing about Atraxa is she's a newer card. Wizards loves to ban older cards that have been in the format for a long time. And love is too strong of a word. They don't like to ban cards at all, really. But they'll choose older cards that have had their time in Standard and then ban them. They don't like to ban newer cards unless it's absolutely necessary. So I thought Atraxa was pretty unlikely to get banned because she just came out in Phyrexia All Will Be One. Hasn't been in Standard for that long of a time. People are probably going to get sick of her, but I don't even think Atraxa is necessarily as dangerous as Itali, or possibly even Titan of Industry. There's a lot to be said for affecting the board. Itali and Titan of Industry both affect the board more than Atraxa does. And actually, I think Itali is much more ban-worthy. Because Atraxa is a consideration for how you build your own deck. But Atali warps the format to where you have to second guess if you want to put a 7-drop or 9-drop card in your deck because the opponent might get it for free off of their Atali. And that's format warping in a way that I think is a little bit unhealthy. So, yeah, I think Atali could be a problem in the long run. Anyway, Atraxa, yeah, she's annoying. And it does hurt when you've been grinding out a game with the opponent. You've, gradually ground out some card advantage against them, and then they just Atraxa and fill up their hand. That's annoying. But most of the decks that I play like that are value grinds, are so good at it that Atraxa usually doesn't matter that much from the opponent. Might sound weird to say, but that's been my experience playing against her. Most of the time they don't get Atraxa to stick. Maybe they reanimate her a couple of times, play a couple more, and just keep removing them, and they mill out. It's... I don't know what to tell you. I feel like some people have more trouble with this card than I do. Anyway, she's not getting banned. She's going to be around. So Reckoner Bankbuster is going to bust its last bank here in Standard for a while. I understand why. It's such an exceptionally good card that it just kind of slots into any deck that's not extremely aggressive. And even an extremely aggressive deck could sideboard it in if you have enough 3-power creatures to crew this up to be an offensive option. Then you could sideboard it in a game where you need to go a little bit grindier and get more value. And it would still be an offensive option in a deck like that. So yeah, it can go into practically any deck at all. And does. And Ubiquity does count for something. Any card that gets played that much does start to warp the format. Like, the prevalence of Reckoner Bankbuster and Fable of the Mirrorbreaker have made it so that running main board, main deck, artifact enchantment removal, like Lauren of the Third Path, was just the correct option. You just always run it. It's not a sideboard thing. You run it in the main deck, you'll have targets. We'll see what happens. Are there still going to be targets? Is Wedding Announcement going to take its place? Are some other cards going to take its place? There's a couple other cards on this page that I'm curious if they're going to find a home in Standard now that Bankbuster's leaving. One's Investigator's Journal. So, Investigator's Journal does not make creatures, does not become a creature. All it does is draw you cards. So this is clearly weaker than Reckoner Bankbuster. The only ways in which it can be better are you might be able to draw more than 3 cards off of counters with this. You only need 2 counters on it to draw 3 cards total because you can sacrifice it. And sacrificing it's an interesting option. That's not something Bankbuster could do. So if you're running like a white deck and you've got, Restoration of Iganjo, the angel that lets you play, small permanents out of your graveyard, this can sacrifice itself to get it into your graveyard so that you can replay it out of your graveyard again. And I think that has some value. It's not as much of a slam dunk, because it only gets suspect counters on it if someone has creatures. You need, between you and the opponent, you need one of you to have creatures, otherwise it's only going to draw you 1 card. I still think this card could see play in Standard, though. I think it could. It's not going to be as much of a slam dunk as Reckoner Bankbuster, it's not going to go into as many decks as Reckoner Bankbuster, but I think it could be playable. Another one that I think is an interesting one-of copy to add to a deck is Monument to Perfection. So you don't need to activate the second mode on this card for it to be good. Right, it's a Journeyer's Kite, straight up on the front side. Just, 2-mana artifact, pay 3 and tap, go find a basic land. Or you could find a Sphere or a Locust. That means you could find Mirrex, which can produce mites for you and stuff. Or you could, find the land that copies artifacts. And even if you're just finding basics, That's an effect that control decks want. Right, a lot of times when I'm watching someone like Covert Go Blue play a control deck, what he really wants to hit, what he finds with his card draw spells, are lands. And Monument to Perfection finds lands. Does it at instant speed. Now, I don't know if you want 2 copies or more, unless you're actually going to try to transform this thing. And, sorry, it doesn't actually transform, it just becomes a 9/9 construct. Blah-de-blah. You know what I mean. You know what I mean. But I think 1 copy in a grindy deck that wants card advantage and wants to hit its land drops could be really good. Could be a replacement for a Reckoner Bankbuster. And I also think Investigator's Journal could play a role here. So, those are a couple of my cards to watch out for now that Bankbuster is going to be leaving. And that about wraps it up for my discussion here on cards in the ban announcement. Things that could have been, would have been, should have been. And now it's time to see how the format shakes up. So, if you've enjoyed my content, like, subscribe, do all the YouTube stuff, and until next time, stay cool.